Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn 10th standard unit 6 prose, the last lesson. Poor man, it was an honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes, and now he understood why the old man of the village were sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were sorry too that they had not gone to school more. It was their way of thanking his master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. While he was thinking all of this, he heard his name called. It was his turn to recite. Here, he's referred to the friends. What would he not have given to be able to say the dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake. But he got mixed up on the first words and stood there, holding on to his desk, his heart beating and not daring to look up. He heard Mr. Hamel say to him, "I won't scold you, little Franz. I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, but I have plenty of time. I will learn it tomorrow, and now you see where we have come out. Oh, that's a great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, how is it? You pretend to be Frenchman, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language. But you are not the worst. Poor little Franz, we have all the great deal to reproach ourselves with. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills, so as to have a little more money, and he have been to blame also. Have I often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday? Then from one thing to another, Mr. Hamel went on talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. He was amazed to see how well he understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. He think too that he had never listened so carefully, and then he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. After the grammar, they had a lesson in writing. That day, Mr. Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing the fish hooks as if that was French too. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low, and he thought to himself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? Whenever he looked up from his writing, he saw Mr. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Everything in that little schoolroom. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same place, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him, just like that. Only the desk and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hawthorn that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, they had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted the Baba. Down there at the back of the room, old Hassan had put on his spectacles and, holding his premier in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remembered it, that last lesson. All at once the church clock struck 12. Then the Angelus, at the same moment the trumpets of the Prussians returning from the drill sounded under the windows. Mr. Hamel stood up, very pale in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friends, said he. Aye, but something choked him. He could not talk. Then he turned on the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed, you may go. Then he returned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Viva la France. Then he stopped and leaned his head on the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed, you may go. Okay students, I hope you are all understood. Thank you.